Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Awesome. Thank you for coming out on this really wild, weather-wise day. I had a lot of snow this morning, and now it's more or less settled. Massachusetts spring. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Donovan. I'm the director of the Poetry Center here at Smith. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It is wonderful to see you all for our reading with Yalie Saweda Kamara, as well as the winner and finalists of this year's high school prize, Poetry Prize for Girls. I first met Yalie in 2023 when she came to campus for a week after winning the Elizabeth Alexander Award for Poetry from Meridians, the journal right here at Smith. Yalie and I spoke for a while, and then I remember feeling so lucky to have met her and to have had the chance to talk to her about poetry and politics and Ohio, and we just gossiped for a little bit too. And I remember feeling incredibly grateful to be introduced to this, the really beautiful and unforgettable poems in Yalie's book. So we are so happy to welcome Yalie back to campus. It's been a long time in the making. I'm thrilled to have her back. I also want to extend a special welcome to all of the guests who have traveled for many hours in some cases to be here tonight. And I also want to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us online for our live streaming, especially if you're Yalie's mom who's joining us from California, I believe. A special shout out. Yeah. I mean, I know you know this, but Yalie's really amazing. So hosting the high school prize and the high school prize winners, it's one of our favorite nights of the year at the Poetry Center. And here's how tonight will work. So after a few announcements, I'll be introducing this year's readers from our high school contest. You'll hear poems by our 3 finalists, as well as this year's contest winner. Following the reading by the students, I'll have the pleasure of introducing Yalie. And then following Yalie's reading, she and I will be on stage where I'll have a chance to ask her questions provided by many of you if you're in my English 112 Reading Contemporary Poetry class. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. After Yalie and I have a chance to talk, Yalie will be seated right up here, as always, at the purple tablecloth, where she'd be happy to sign books, but also just to say hello if you want to come by and say hi. So please feel free to do that. I want to thank Tom Kleitis for streaming tonight's event, as well as our co-sponsors for this reading tonight, which include Africana Studies, the Department of English Language and Literature, and the Study for Women, Gender, and Sexuality. I also wanted to just say to all of you that our core poetry interns, in honor of National Poetry Month, have designed poetry postcards that are up there in the back. So as you're going out, just take a look. They're really beautifully designed. They're really beautifully curated. And maybe there's someone in your life you want to send a poem to. And so just take a look at that. The selections are great. And so it's National Poetry Month, which we honor at the Poetry Center. And then we also don't want it corralled into just one month. So also take a postcard and send it in June or July to someone as well. We have I just want a couple of brief announcements as our season just begins to wind down, but we have 2 really wonderful events right on the horizon. First of all, on April 21st, right here in the same room at the same time, we'll have the Smith College Capstone Poetry reading. So please tune in for that, come back for that. That is also one of our favorite nights of the year, and that's going to be a fantastic event. And then on April 28th, in case you don't know, we'll be hosting Dinez Smith, and we're obviously really looking forward to that event as well. Dinez will be reading over in John M. Green that night. That'll be our last event of the year, so also hope you can attend that, and hope you can also just spread the word. Also, if you need someone who needs a poem, maybe they need a Dinez Smith poem that night. And English 112, just remember to scan the QR codes when they go up towards the end of the evening. It is now my total pleasure to welcome this year's winners of our high school prize for girls. Every year, the Boutelle-Day Poetry Center sponsors this event, and every year I find myself truly stunned by the fabulous submissions we receive. Smith College students helped select the semifinalists from the more than 150 submitted poems, and Yalie chose the contest winner and the finalists. So our three finalists in alphabetical order are Cassidy Koo from Hunter College High School in New York for her poem Fragmentation, Penny Wei from the Dana Hall School in Wellesley, Mass. for her poem They Say All Girls Are the Same, Jessica Yuhan Wu from Middlesex School in Concord, Mass. for her poem Bleach Haiku, and this year's winner is Hannah Hahn from the Emma Willard School in Troy, New York for her poem While the War Happens Elsewhere. Here's what Yalie said about the work of tonight's finalists. This is just a direct quote from Yalie. These poems are virtuosic, daring, and perspicacious, perspicacious, both in their formal expression and content. I am inspired by the distinctiveness of each writer's voice and quite confident that I will be hearing more of these poets' voices in the world and in the very near future. We're just talking about over dinner too. It is really formidable what these poets are all doing on the page, worlds away, for instance, from where I was as a writer in high school, and it's really inspiring and moving and thrilling to see already how accomplished their poems are. And here's what Yalie said about this year's contest winner. While the War Happens Elsewhere is a masterful work, a quiet storm. Through careful crafting of several imagistic narratives, the poet creates a polyvocal testimony. Part confession, part reportage, part memory, part meditation, this prescient poem implores its readers to deepen their capacity for empathy and ability to confront human suffering. At its core, this poem is a brilliant call to dignity. We are all in for a treat. Please welcome to the stage, Cassidy Koo.
Hi, everyone. This poem is called Fragmentation. Fragmentation. In the 19th century, Princess Alexandra Amalie of Bavaria, a writer and German royal, developed a delusion in her early 20s that, as a child, she had swallowed a grand piano made of glass. She was convinced that the object remained inside her body from that point on, fearful that it might shatter and puncture her organs. Who knew that my body would become a crystal ball to catch and release, opulent and rare, a sack of daisies with their petals like loose screws strewn all over my doorstep, as if there was a risk I would mishandle my own faith, mishandle my own fate. Wet as wine and screaming, revolution scrawled in red blood all over the bed, and still, my parents named me an Irish princess, polishing my marble skin, predicted it into existence as I stared back slit-eyed and steamed like a fish out of water. But I am not. I am forever in my life's early spring, so goddamn expensive, when a baby becomes a bread box for all things unfamiliar and many-headed. Did you know, caked in all that white flour, I cannot even speak the mother tongue? The music is inside me and the song is incomprehensible. So goddamn fragile, comical, some tune drenched in dry air that you'd play for a know-nothing cinephile who believes that there are carnations underneath the Gobi Desert, growing hidden, so hidden. Look how I float across the screen, so hidden. Afraid to admit that I was born to fulfill some kind of promise, except it's gone now, that's it. Even my auspicious eye whiff and fists built from sponge had to watch it leave. All these things filled with light leave no room for real flesh, leave no room in the lungs, caramelize a delicate crust over veins that only the dirty rich will ever understand and only dirty-mouthed poets will ever dare to document. Canaries between teeth, a sharp, sharp staircase up to heaven that ends much closer than you'd think. I balanced my weight on each black and finger-sized key from then on, shifted gallbladder and kidney to the shape of oolong leaves at a scam psychic, became adept at the art of circular breathing, at swallowing every writhing solid mass, at this metaphysical preservation of shard in service of our slower death. Thank you.
They say all girls are the same. I am pretty. No, I am not half as pretty as you. To me, you are a traffic light, humming in 3/4 time, and your hair is pounding against the green. And every time I blink, the sky turns into tinfoil and reflects your version of pretty. Your cheeks are always caught red-handed by sun, and your forged freckles shine like a gallery of deers and deers. Darling, you are the lingering superstition of fake email sign-offs. Do you not get it? You told me how time behaves like lukewarm honey, as if snail slow and loyal to gravitational legislatures. But I say I only believe in your type of time. You, asking me if your knuckles looked philosophical under fluorescence while brushing lint off your sleeve. You are a good American daughter. Your hair smelled like library dust and bergamot, so when you spoke about Derrida, I thought of seahorse and how the males carry the babies. How unfair it is that I carry you in every sentence. In class, someone said you got perfect scores again, and I said, of course you did, except this time your name appeared in my Spotify queue after Glass Beach and Eco 2K and smelled like ambition or something equally acidic. At my chipped nail polish, you laughed guiltless, because you always get them gelled, so I redeem myself with the rationale of performance art. You say art is dead, and that you're going to major in comp sci, but your lips are cherry red, and the coffee you spilled is symmetrical as divine entropy forming galaxies on the counter. Every time you tilt your head, an entire theory of consciousness collapses. I mean that as a compliment. Everything I say about and to you is a compliment, sweet and savory alike. I quote from you like a cult. 1. Your beauty is being a habit. 2. We're all just constellations of accidents. 3. My spirit is a breaststroke swimmer when rinsed in too much salt water, and that my silence has a pretty shape of sea glass. Whenever my shadow arrives late, it must have followed your scent again. You must have been walking somewhere bright. Your laugh left fingerprints on my window. There's nothing I can do about it. If I ever dream of you again, please rearrange my organs alphabetically and bend my crescented envy into a spoon. I hate that I love you. Thank you.
Bleach haiku. Summer evening, moths circle the silent lake, stirring the water. Endnotes. 1. Bathed in an alabaster glow, we dangle our legs over the lacquered water surface. Sun-baked Chinese girls in borrowed Americana, 3 sizes too big. We strung friendship bracelets from spider webs, pretended our names were Becky or Sue, like those catalog girls who beamed in gingham. You peel the sky like a clementine, sections scattering to cicada hum. An orange tang clung to the corners of your lips. I could have kissed you then, dusk spilling golden ichor into our mouths. 2. Its wings were paper, aching for fire. The cheap white porch ball buzzes on, spilling its smoke across the yard. We watch as the air thickens with wings, moths slamming their bodies against the glass, frantic to sacrifice themselves to heaven's halo. Was it the light they sought, or was it some stubborn pull they could not resist, bodies wound too tight to turn away? I wondered if we were any different, irresistibly drawn to a glow that could never belong to us, circling it until our powder shed from skin. One slipped behind the socket, and its wings fluttered to stillness. The night gave no answer whether it found its light or only its ending. 3. Cicadas drowning themselves in the tremoloing heat. Exuviae scattered haphazardly around our sandals, amber husks vibrating with phantom legs. I bent over the lake, and your face was swimming in it like an overripe moon. Henna freckles blurred into darting minnows. You said if we jumped in now, the whole night would bleach us clean. Will we then climb out new? Maybe even white? Maybe even shining? You leaned closer, breath grazing my cheeks, as if daring me to fall. Dusk tightened its hold on our throats. I cupped the water, and it broke.
While the war happens elsewhere. In the hospital, the ivy hums like a small stream behind glass. I watch snow fall in the Hudson by Riverside Park, quiet, gray, without destination, and think of a boy crouched behind his mother, somewhere far from here, where sky is louder. On the news, they speak of casualties as though they've never held a body, never brushed dust from a cheek. I think of the men digging through a broken stone for a shoe, a spoon, anything just to say, I am here. Here, the radiator rattles. The snow keeps falling, even when I stop watching. A woman cries in the next room, her voice tearing through dry walls like an animal with no mouth. Later, the nurse comes to kick for applesauce and water, until her voice gone, her eyes on the cup, as though it contains the name she has never remembered. I sit beside the window and touch the soft place under my jaw to remember I'm still in this life. Somewhere, a child is born in the middle of war. He cries, no one comes. Somewhere, a man wraps his wife in a sheet and carries her toward the sound of birds that do not belong to this country. Somewhere, a boy steps off a bus, his hands empty, but drawn to the chest as if remembering what they once carried. I think of all the tender things that hold us. I think of how the world breaks, how a mouth can open only to swallow smoke, how mercy moves slower than blood. How, when I was 6, salmon flooded so fast the street became a single brown throat. My father carried me through the current, through broken glass and bicycles, the smell of oil and rot. I saw neighbors cling to rooftops, calling names that disappears into the water's open mouth. The current bit our knees, dragged our shadows down like something hungry. He said, hold on, and I held on. Thank you.
Can we please get one more round of applause to these 4 amazing poets? That was really beautiful, and congratulations again to all 4 of you. That was such a treat to hear those pieces. Thank you. I also, just before I introduce Yalie, I realized I forgot to thank Roz from Broadside Books, who's back there selling copies of Yalie's just utterly spectacular book. So please be sure to drop by and think about picking one up after the event if you haven't already done so. Shout out to Roz from Broadside. And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Yalie. The title poem, oh no, excuse me. Let me start again. The title poem of Yalie Saweda Kamara's brilliant and radiant debut collection is one I find myself thinking about on a regular basis. In its narrative, the speaker, sitting in a car with her mother, overhears 2 teenage boys saying goodbye to one another. Besedu, one of them says as they smack palms. When the mother doesn't understand what was said, the speaker translates, be safe, dude. And from there, the word takes on an incantatory life of its own, becoming a catch-all form of blessing with talismanic properties. Besedu, the poem repeats 12 different times. And I love not only how this word serves as a kind of spell casting within the poem, a bit of personal lexicon that's held close and repeated like a prayer, but also how it eddies out across the entire collection. It strikes me as essential for the themes of Yalie's book, for instance, that the speaker, rather than inventing the word herself, inherits it through a moment of witness in the community. Two boys reach for each other, clasp hands, wish each other well, and it becomes something holy, something for the speaker to draw upon and return to during times of struggle or when no other words will do. Among many other things, the poems in Yalie's collection serve, through powerful acts of witness, as a love letter to her beloved community of Oakland. Discussing the origins of her collection in an interview with The Rumpus, Yalie said that much of the urgency of the book came from thinking about home and place and identity, and that she wanted to not only celebrate the richness and nuance of her communities, but compose correctives to the ways in which those places have been maligned. That first act of corrective begins in the opening lines of her book, where, in a long ode to the city she loves, she begins first with a glib claim about Oakland, as decreed by outsiders. Oakland is a killing field, they say. Yalie's poem, though, not only reveals that finger-pointing pronouncement as being fueled by nothing more than stereotype, but also a true failure of imagination, or even a rudimentary ability to open one's eyes and see. While the language of the judgmental can only traffic in closed-minded discourse, their metaphor relegated to the cliché of the killing field, the speaker's rapturous restoration of place begins with an evocation of sweetness and a vivid and individualized personification of the seasons. But what about the fragrance of candy in public places, the speaker asks, and how autumn waits tight-lipped while summer slowly stretches its limbs like a tired infant. Later in the poem, the speaker supplants the expectation of urban violence with a trickle of blood, quote, pricked by a blackberry bush of Thornhill Drive. Sometimes, the speaker says, pain in Oakland comes from foraging through a thicket of joy. I love this gesture, and that notion of joy as a literal and figurative thicket puts me in mind of Ross Gay. Joy, Gay insists, has nothing to do with ease and needs to be understood as a profound, hard-earned experience that stems from sorrow and acts of bereavement that connect us. Joy, he writes, forges a new kind of togetherness, a joining. Yalie's poems strike me as hard-earned acts of lyric rummaging of America's numerous thickets, as they seek in any one of her dazzling myriad forms love and redemption and grace, whether through odes of place or grief for someone killed in the community, or celebrations of figures such as Gabby Douglas or Nina Simone. Yalie Saweda Kamara is a Sierra Leonean American writer, educator, and researcher from Oakland, California. She is an assistant professor of English at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio, where she specializes in creative writing, global and diasporic literature, and hip-hop studies. She was the winner of the 2022-23 Jake Adam York Prize, and Yalie Kamara's debut full-length collection, Besato, was published by Milkweed in 2024 and was the winner of the 2025 Ohio Book Awards. She is also the editor of the anthology, What You Need to Know About Me, Young Writers on Their Experience of Imagination, from the Hawkins Project in 2022, and the author of A Brief Biography of My Name, which is a part of the New Generation African Poets chapbook box set. Please join me in joy in welcoming Yalie to the stage.
Good evening, y'all. How are you guys doing? Good? I'm so very happy to be here. Got a lot of thank yous. So thank you all for coming out here. I heard it snowed this morning. I was sleeping in. I couldn't be witness to that nonsense. So very happy that you guys are here on a cold day and that we're keeping each other warm. I want to thank Matt Donovan and Jen Blackburn and the whole crew over at the Boutelle-Day Poetry Center for such a wonderful visit and such warmth and care. And it's always a pleasure to return to Smith College. So thank you for friendship and community. I want to thank everyone who also is here tonight from the winners. So the finalists and the winners. I wanted to congratulate Cassidy, Penny, Jessica, and winner Hannah for the extraordinary poetry. And like I said before, I know that this is just the beginning for you all, and I'm just like really excited to see more of your work in the world. So thank you for gracing us with your truths and with the beauty of your writing. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna get, are those all my thank yous for now? Yeah, I'm gonna get started. Okay, so, time. I don't wanna be that guy. Okay, here we go. So, I'm gonna read some new poems and also some poems from Biseidu. And the first poem I wanna read for you guys is a poem called is anybody from Oakland, by the way, in here? Oh, look at that. Look at that, we're in the wild, I love it. Okay, cool. I'm going to read a poem called Why I Write. And this is after Rosemary Catacallos, who was the Poet Laureate of Texas. I write because I'm afraid of forgetting. Oh, what this mind and heart can disappear in the clutches of bliss, sorrow, rage, and wonder. I write because Basma, a Palestinian grandmother who shared the secret to a good kanafe, she uses honey, wanted to feed me a bagel on our flight to Michigan. I write because I remember the guilt she felt on her way to a wedding at a time like this. I write because in that very instance, my mother was experiencing the same melancholy at a cousin's ceremony in London while tending to the grief of losing her last-born. I write because they both needed to hear each other's story, because they needed to touch each other's precious and enduring faces through me. I write because isn't it always a time like this? I write because so often we grin while wet, warm, and salted morning rolls down our cheeks, entering our parted lips, sinking into the rolling pink hills of our tongues. I write because only here can I imagine us growing a mouthful of daylilies in the darkest hour. I write because there needs to be a record of this simultaneity, how we build each other up as we fall apart and compel each other, brethren and sistren, to rise again. I write because this is a strand of love. I write because there is so much more to write about love. I write because I need to chronicle this wilderness and its manifold and gorgeous offerings, the pungent and sweet stink of the maracuja, the gooey opal of coconut oil sleeping in a jar, the flamboyant and perfect architecture of a bird of paradise, the chocolatey aroma of the Hoya plant whose petals I am yet to inhale, the sunset orange hue that blasts from a steaming halved sweet potato, the way it sounds when a loved one is listening. It is literally the Pacific Ocean undulating to creamy foam. I write because my mother's 2 fern plants grew Rapunzel long when she watered them and spoke to them in Creole. I write because my orphan grandmother had a 6th grade education but could speak 4 dialects. I write because she helped me win spelling bees. I write because sometimes I take the 27 bus and every old man that looks like my grandfather has got something to say, and we should listen, but failed to do so. I write because I never got higher than a B- in my 11th grade honors English class. I can remember the red ink strike through like welts across the essay pages. I write because I remember the bracket across my best paragraph. And so he wrote with no acknowledgement of my labor. I write because he said poets make no money in class weeks after learning of my interest in this art form. I write because he forgot to mention the divinity, prophecy, and power of poetry. I write because I must strain the humility from the humiliation. I write because it is my vow to not shrink the spirits of the people I am meant to nurture. I write because our world is populated with philosophers without degrees and doctors of philosophy who haven't earned their degrees in humanity. I write because of the mercurial and ephemeral nature of shame, how we can repurpose the almost derailment of destiny. I write because it is a strand of love. I write because I forgive my English teacher. I write because people are living and rotting in cages. I write because people have lived and rotted in boats. I write because it constitutes the separation of families. I write because slaughter is a worldwide and storied tradition. I write because slaughter needn't be our tradition or inheritance. I write because I must remember that my little sister Jenna, taught me that the only way to make the world better is to find one of its aching holes and press my heart into it. I write because my father's voice has thinned from thunder to wind. I write because one nephew is losing teeth and the other is thinking about college. I write because my sister Kai is growing golden raspberries and plums and learning lessons from the Almighty in her garden. I write because my sister Famata is up at 4 a.m. preparing to check the pulses of the incarcerated. I write because God told me to. I write because God forced my hand. I write because my folks named me Gria, which means God whispered it to them first. I write because I have no choice but to be tethered to possibility. I write because faith is a muscle and hope requires rigor. I write because we deserve to be healed and healing is a birthright. I write because I forget this so often and we must remember. Thank you. So I'm going to read a poem about my mother. You guys probably have all met my mom. Some of y'all met my mom through the poems. So I like to do this poll. Hi, Mom. If you have a mom that has a lot of opinions, raise your hand. If you have an auntie, keep your hands up. If you have an auntie that has a lot of opinions, raise your hand. If you have a grandma that has a lot of opinions, raise your hand. If you got a big sis that has a lot of opinions, raise your hand. Okay, that's everybody in this room. So this poem is thinking about that. I've said that my mother is right 98% of the time, 99, but I don't tell her that, okay? And so this poem is called Mother's Rules, and this is 100% fact. Mother's Rules for my mother, Agatha Kamara. 1, if you see me praying in the living room, never sit in front of me. You are not God. 2, when we go to a restaurant and I don't know any of the foods on the menu, never order me a meal that is spelt with silent letters. I came to eat, not to explore. 3, you didn't make food. No, God did. You cooked food. Watch your English, watch your faith. 4, your Creole is offensive. When you speak, you sound like Shabba Ranks. Your accent is funny, but keep practicing. It is the only way we'll be able to gossip in peace while at the supermarket. 5, try to learn the language of your lover and his family. They could be smiling to your face and getting ready to trade you for 6 goats and 3 mules during your first trip to their homeland. She really said that. 6, if anyone stares at you for too long, more than 5 seconds, start speaking an imaginary language while maintaining eye contact. They will be the first to look away. That works on public transportation. 7, consider the consequence of purchasing human hair wigs, secondhand clothing, and used furniture. Maybe you will feel beautiful and also save money, but you never know whose bad luck or misfortune will be sitting on your head, body, or in the home in which you sleep. Buy what you can truly afford. 8, your father's Muslim, so you are too. 1989 to 1993. I am Christian, so you are too. 1993 to 2012. I am Catholic now, but you keep praying. 2012 to present. 9, you laugh at me now, like I laughed at my mother, like she laughed at hers, like your daughters will laugh at you, and I will live long enough to forgive your folly. 10, just make sure to pray. Amen. Thank you. So speaking of Oakland, I'm gonna read a haiku. Haiku's called You Can't Touch This. Does anybody know what that's a reference to? Some of us in the building who are maybe over 40. MC Hammer. Okay, so this is a haiku that kind of distills part of my childhood. So it's called You Can't Touch This. Oakland, California, 1990. My 6th birthday gift was a pair of hammer pants made of real kente. That's it, that's all. So my people from Oakland who are far up there, where are you from in Oakland? Okay. Where'd you go to school? Okay, was Zendaya's school, right? Okay. I'm still claim you, Oakland cousin. Okay. Okay, I feel it from you. I hear it in you. No, it's all good. I'm claiming you. Who else? Was there somebody else from Oakland up there? Was it just one? Yes, where are you from? Okay. Thornhill, which is in my book, which is the street I grew up on. That is so funny. Okay, I'm gonna read the poem about Oakland. Oakland is home and home is myth. And this is also for anybody who is from a city that has a reputation that doesn't live up to the truth or the beauty of the place you know it to be. Okay, so this is A poem about Oakland, okay? And for anybody else who feels like their city is like a sister city to Oakland. Oakland is home, home is myth, for my sister Chanel Celistock. Oakland is a killing field, they say, but what about the fragrance of candy in public places and how autumn waits tight-lipped while summer slowly stretches its limbs like a tired infant? The upper level of the MacArthur BART station smells like Palmer's cocoa butter because being ashy in the town is worse than jaywalking. The aroma of chocolate blankets the opposing platforms while warm air kisses bare ankles and calves. Folks are ready to flex for this last bit of summer. October here is like July almost anywhere else. Oakland is a killing field, they say. But what if in this story of trickling blood, there is no gun, but instead a finger pricked by a blackberry bush on Thornhill Drive? And what if the sting is forgiven when the fruit's tangy juice launches itself across the endpoints of our mouths like a shooting star at the horizon of Skyline Boulevard? Sometimes pain in Oakland comes from forging through a thicket of joy. Oakland is a killing field, they say. But what about ritual rising from downtown's liquid belly? Amoeba-shaped Lake Merritt is the largest man-made body of water in America. No native in the last 50 years has lived to tell about happily swimming in the murky brown pool, for we know better. We show our love from the shores. You'll find us sitting cross-legged, either sharing office break secrets or watching our babies tangle in the verdant grass blades of the lake's banks. Lake Merritt is a confessional booth. We release our fears and secrets into the mouth of algae hungering to filter any wisdom from our chaos. We show gratitude in return, crafting an air-shaped haiku at the water's edge. The town pilgrimage, exchange worry for hope, and wash away madness. That was a haiku. Oakland is a killing field, they say. But what about Raphael Sadiq's voice and how it coaxes the fog to burn invisibly, or the silver-haired stranger who makes a paper plane with a little boy he just met at the Fruitvale BART station and then teaches him how to mischievously fly it down the 54 buses' narrow aisle? What about our Michelin food rating surveys? The way we walk slowly past Mexican, Ethiopian, and Korean eateries just to make sure that the food is good enough for Mexican, Ethiopian, and Korean folks to eat there too. Oakland is a killing field, they say. Oakland is a killing field, maybe, they say. Most outsiders quietly confess to not knowing which is better, to approach the town with a fistful of flowers or frame covered by a bulletproof vest. They fidget while we walk past, the keys to the town's front door jingling in our pocket. Wise, sassy, fickle, and human, we are the buck-toothed city that made you wish you never wore braces. Land of dirty concrete and sunshine, land of the slain and ever rising, land of Tom Hanks and bullets, and I'll add Marshawn Lynch also, land of sideshows and Market Hall, land of chow mein and pine trees. It's true, our contradiction is dizzying. We fall and get back up again and tell you that we didn't mean to make our mistake look like a dance. All that big booty attitude in those small Bay Area jeans. How many times have they told us that we are marred and marked by the failures with which we thirst to atone? Yes, we mourn, but let us celebrate. We are warriors, go warriors. Hello or goodbye, they extend reluctant salutations, and still we let them into our living room. Oakland, they call you riotous, though you're just a mouthful of pop rocks. To claim that your nightfall is endless is easy. If they knew how to read the darkness, they would have figured it out by now. The object that casts the biggest shadow is the one closest to the light. Thank you. You guys doing okay? Yeah? Okay. Can I read a love poem? Are you guys into love poems? Cool, okay. Hi, Matt. Okay. It's his poem, so I was like, is it okay if I read it? He's like, yeah, it's cool. So we had a little talk. So this is for Matt. This is for my partner's hands. The poem is called Your Hands Are the Sighted Sight. Your hands are the sighted sight of your own corporeal wonder and praise. These 10 digits that sprout from the 6'5" infinity of you are worth note and song. Do you recall in October that they were my introduction to your body? Back when we were all Google Voice and SMS, I asked if you had tattoos and you texted a photo of your left thumb and the evergreen that was stamped on its peach flesh spine. I marveled at the tiny, lonesome tree floating in the majesty of this appendage. I already knew I liked the hand I could see so much so I heard my own whisper spiraling in my body. Hot damn, I said to myself as I zoomed in on your clipped cloud white nails, so fresh and so clean, I could not imagine how you lived, how you breathed in your own life elsewhere. I already liked the hand I could see, and coming to think of it, I also liked the hand I could not see, but would come to know weeks later across the scape of my back when you held me politely and our first hug so preciously as to not ruffle even a single fiber of my linen dress. 20 minutes later, your index would guard a fork full of lamb from your plate to mine. Did you know this kind of kindness undid me? How, without prompting, you wanted to share a delicious bite, short of knowing if I deserved such a thing, but were telling me I did? I watched them closer. At the bar, how they were laced under your chin and you stared at me with the attention that unnerved me and made me realize it is possible to listen with more than ears. I'm so happy that you love your hands and that I get to learn the biography of your gentleness and your fear of destroying what is in your possession and how it began when you broke your friend's ornament in kindergarten. And I think of the burden of such a story and how pain might make you so careful that you know how to hold air without even scratching it. And I think of all the ways I may learn to hold you like that, how I may do good in the world, with what my third grade classmates called E.T. fingers, until a best friend called them piano fingers, and taught me a lesson in refashioning an ugly time. And each time I'm with you, I want to practice how to be soft, follow your lead, how I melt and sink into your surrender. When you hold me with the blessed velvets of you, your plush palms, memory foam, numbered members, grasping, holding, remembrance, archiving, how I too want to never forget, how I want to be so scared to shatter the sacred that it makes me brave enough to treat it with full attention, which is a type of intention. I want to touch delicate like you. Your tenderness, sweet love, is the light. Thank you. Okay, so I think the next poem I want to read a poem called Space, which is thinking about childhood and how I was playing a game when I was really young, probably in first grade or kindergarten, where I'd misspell my name. And this is based on a true story, but I think it was one of my first lessons in learning about how sometimes adults don't see you or don't know how to see you properly. So this is a poem based on that. Does anybody have a name in here that's often misspelled or mispronounced? Okay, yeah. Okay, so quite a few folks in here. Okay, so this poem is called Space. At the age of 7, a letter was plucked from my name as a test to see who would catch the error, to see who'd care enough to go search for the rest of me. For about 4 months, my name appeared as Yale on the page. A part of me wonders why some names are sweeter than others and become the nectar that pools at the base of our memory. Would anyone let Zabel, Richard, Elizabeth, or Sinclair escape from the 9th letter of the alphabet? Me and my broken name, less heavy than before, began to float away to somewhere else. No search party was sent to check between the monkey bars, under the desks, my cubby, or the palms of my hands. There was no red pen to correct the flaw. Nobody else played the game, so there's no record of the joyful sound that was made when the long-lost me found the small brown eye. Thank you. Okay, y'all read the book. Do I have any requests? That's the last hit. I got you, though. Haiku in Paris, yes. Pages that, okay. Okay, 33. Thank you. I don't even think I read this one that often. I will tell you, there are people online that have argued that this is not a haiku. There's a group of haiku purists out there, so I've really made my way in the writing world. I'm pissing off people with haikus, so here we go. A haiku for the train, Ligne 7, Courneuve-Villejuif, Paris, France. A man counting cracked rocks gives up his seat for 2 girls and their father. And that's the haiku. Thank you. So these are a series of haikus that take place on public transportation, just kind of things that I've seen that make me sort of wonder about what we know about people and what we don't know about people and humanity. And so that was something that I saw. I don't know what crack rocks look like. but I'm pretty sure that's what I saw that day. And so, but just to, in tropes, we're not allowed to think that someone would do that for someone else. And so I really like how the public transportation is a space that's subversive and allows us to see the best of people in unusual situations. So thank you for that. I'm going to read a poem called Grab Bag, May 1998. And so these poems are pretty autobiographical, a lot of them, and this is thinking about education. And I will say that there is a bit of a content warning here on sexual assault, but this is thinking about sex ed in 1998 in Oakland, California. So here's the poem, and thinking about that experience, and then decades later learning about what that meant to me. Grab Bag, May 1998. After watching a grainy video of a million sperms swimming upstream in pursuit of a singular egg, followed by a short film imploring boys to wear loose jeans in order to preserve this very count, we arrive at this week's highlight, and most of the reason why I decide this will be the first and only time I forged my mother's signature on a permission slip. I don't think she knew I did that. The magical sex grab bag. Ms. Smith instructs us to neatly write our anonymous questions on small scrolls of paper to be placed inside the plum crushed velvet pouch. The life science classroom pulses with the sounds of quickly moving number 2 pencils and the backs of hands dusting eraser bits from desk to floor. Old Spice and Juniper Breeze grip the air. Amidst the squeak of uneven adolescent voices, Ms. Smith smiles, shakes the sack, then loosens its drawstring as if to soon announce the winner of a sweepstake. One student inquires, will having sex doggy style give you butt babies? Another asks, are there hecka ways to not be a virgin no more? Ms. Smith teaches us the word cunnilingus and explains its meaning. That's hella nasty, Milton tries to mumble under his breath. Are your findings based on your being a cunnilingus connoisseur? Ms. Smith retorts slickly with an eyebrow raised in his direction. The overwhelm and the foreignness of these syllables reduces him to a sheepish grin. His butterscotch face crumples to the form of a rare and quiet defeat. I do not remember my question, nor owning my body back then. Ms. Smith constantly fans herself and runs her hand over her crystal ball belly. Under the fluorescent light, she glistens how I imagine a freshly beached mermaid might. She'll be leaving us in a few weeks to have her baby. She plucks the next question quickly, then squints as if shooting lasers onto the squiggle of words, shakes her head and rolls her eyes. She thinks someone in this class is playing. I'm not even going to answer this one. Marshall, who is sitting next to me, nervously chuckles with a bit of her tongue peeking from between her gapped teeth. She read my question. She cups her hands onto my ears and whispers, how come niggas always trying to make you suck they dick? I snicker breathily so that she won't feel alone. Marshall and I are quiet for the rest of the class period. Ms. Smith keeps talking, but I no longer hear her voice. A disappointment rings in my ears. Sex ed is over for me. Ms. Smith becomes what I attempted to escape, the deadbolt lock over a girl's body, the untrained hand too rough for the tender and growing. 2 decades later, I wonder if Ms. Smith has learned the texture of peril, how to use the thorns of language as a guide to the center of its fruit before disposing of it in haste. I imagine what variation the question would have merited a response from Ms. Smith. How are boys learning to use their bodies like weapons, Ms. Smith? Why doesn't he want to hear my voice, Ms. Smith? Why doesn't he know the difference between a request and a demand, Ms. Smith? When does the soreness subside after your head's been shoved into the center of a boy's body, Ms. Smith? Can I say no, Ms. Smith? My name is Marshall, and I will be the first pregnant girl in your 8th grade life science class. Can you help me, Ms. Smith? I needed Ms. Smith, too, for what she might not be able to give, a voice to fight the fear of all the flowers sprouting within me, words to battle any hands trying to uproot me before my season. That week, we thirsted for a grown woman whose water might help save our tiny lives. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to read a poem about Gabby Douglas. Got some Gabby Douglas fans in here? A couple? Cool, more than a couple, excellent. So this poem is thinking about Gabby Douglas, what page is this poem on? Give me 1 second. Oh, there it goes. So this poem is thinking about Gabby Douglas and how she, kind of ran so Simone Biles would fly. She's done a lot of amazing things, set a lot of amazing records. And I remember as she was winning awards for America, there were a lot of comments about her hair and a lot of comments about her appearance, as if she didn't sweat all this much to win all these gold medals. And so I was thinking, if Gabby Douglas were my little sister, what would I do for her? If she were my little sister, she'd probably have a lot more money than me. So I'm like, next thing is haikus, love letters. So I'm thinking about ways of restoring imbalance. And so this poem is thinking about that. It's a bunch of haiku, love letters to Gabby Douglas, and I'll just kind of use my hands to sort of note the different haikus. Haiku love letters for Gabby Douglas. Nappy wins the gold. Metal hangs from 4C curls. Your head holds glory. They said focus on your edges. They must have meant both ends of the vault. The problem is you love yourself whole. This is the most dangerous act. Bend but do not break. Your backflip a metaphor for this whole Black life. If you'd placed your hand on your chest, then we wouldn't have heard your music. Gabby, come knock on our doors. Ask us what we've named our dolls and daughters. While mothers pray for your flight, babies watch your wings caress Jim's skyline. We hold you close, smile when we touch the forests that grow on our own heads. Thank you. So I'm going to read a poem based on something that my mother shared with me about a woman that she grew up with, and the story is that this woman kept on losing her children at a very young age until she decided to name her child something else. And the naming of her child, the understanding is that's what protected her child. So this poem is called Dirty Box, and in Creole, Dirty Box is like a trash can. Dirty Box. It happened almost always just months after each birth. The baby, brown, thick, dimpled, alive, with coo and gurgle, would breathe no more. No medical examiner could explain why, and the mother would commemorate the passing with clockwork lament. A wail climbing up her throat, hot and fierce as bile. 3 times Mabinti Kanu lost her babies before they knew how to walk or say their own name. Dora learned how to stand by holding a wall. Mafere could crawl in circles, and Yebu knew only how to sit up by the end of his first and last rainy season. Mabinti stopped rubbing her belly after it arrived again, the feeling of dread dragging its wet, heavy tongue over her womb. It tasted her love for her unborn, too sweet, soft, sugary to not take a bite, so she began to strain the juice from her own voice. Dirty Box, she started to call the unborn, named him Trash, gliding her fingers across the watermelon print of her stretch marks. Named him something too bitter, the blessing, to sour the amniotic fluid in which he floated, to rot the umbilical cord, to wrap it in filth and refuse in utero. It worked. Dirty Box swam through Mabinti's birth canal, a fake, filthy, so real, he was unwanted by the hand of the beyond. How do you turn death's stomach? Love a child who is never quite pulled from the trenches of dirt. Thank you. I don't know I don't think my mom's heard this poem before. This poem is called Because My Mother Says Don't Repeat This, You Must Know. And so just a little bit about this. I heard some really interesting stories about my aunt, and she was just telling them very casually when we were together on vacation in a hotel room. I told my mom, I was like, I gotta ask her those questions again. My mom's like, you can never ask her those questions again. You can never, ever ask her to repeat what she shared. So this is what I remember from memory of that conversation. And this aunt in my collection is called Auntie X. So, sorry, Mom. Because my mother says don't repeat this, you must know that in the early 80s, Auntie X moved to New Jersey, though I'm not sure where she lived. Perth Amboy, Newark, Orange. At some point, she worked in the hospital, probably fluffing the stiff pillows of elders or even using a bare thumb to lift dribble from a thin lip. The older folks loved her, the first African they'd ever met. Weird British spelling, pretty good English though, charming in American adjacent way. By her own admission, she was too cute for her own good. Auntie X was all mahogany, a head full of dripless jerry curls, staccato laughter, small waist, and a bad winking habit. Her hip action like a slow motion metronome whenever Bunny Mac was on rotation at the disco. She was a threat to too many married men, which is why some nervous and evil wife made the call. So they showed up at her job, them, the ones with the official badges, the clipboards, the multicolored click big pens, and the questions about her paper and her papers. On what floor can we find her? The agents ask, unaware of the morning elevator's mixed company. The 5th floor. Auntie X's manager lies while stepping on her shoe like a gas pedal on the expressway. Auntie X gets it and folds into her own breath like a ghost. Excuse us, they say, unknowingly brushing past her in their exit. Auntie X goes up to the 8th floor. A nurse's assistant whisks her to the 9th. With a blanket in hand, she leaves the America she knows. While they comb the building, she hides in the morgue. Shift nurses come and leave offerings in this tundra of shelved cadavers. Black tea, inspect. Turkey sandwich, inspect. Applesauce, inspect. Auntie X's teeth shatter, inspect. Are you okay, inspect. Blanket, inspect. Weight, inspect. Weight, inspect. She looks at her watch, the cold metal on her wrist made colder by the absence of time in this new country. Eventually, they leave. Auntie X inhales and thaws out in a staff room. They halfway promise to return, though they never do. The hospital keeps her and gives her more hours, perhaps impressed by how she plays dead. She blesses them still. Auntie X tells me this in a hotel room on a cool September evening. The air conditioner blasts against her bare shoulders. She hands me a $100 bill. Get some boots, she says. This winter will be cold. Thank you. So I'm going to read a couple more poems. So I'm going to read a poem about sobriety. So before I became sober about a decade ago, I thought I could really dance. And then I became sober, and I didn't really know how to dance. Well, I was aware that I didn't know how to dance, let's put it that way. So I was thinking about ways of thinking about a new type of dance, right? Thinking about my two-step. Does everybody here know what a two-step is? Just kind of like, basic introductory dance. I was thinking about that dance and new ways of thinking about that dance. And this also happened when I was teaching creative writing and we were on a metaphor unit. So I thought about where are all the metaphors for my two-step. So these are all the different ways I imagined or reimagined that dance. So metaphors for my two-step. Name tag, resume, cover letter, elevator pitch, mission statement, not-for-profit, .org, best practices, hip autograph, ankle editing, toe kisses, shin signatures, foot cursive, nickname, white flag, surrender, province, territory, border, flag, mother tongue, root, family tree, coat of arms, broken branch, small dance, shy girl glide, introvert bounce, perfume-footed shimmy, Jesus walk, rapper's delight, tonic water with lime, radio edit, kid-friendly, birth control, curfew, closed eyes, heaven somewhere, becoming Dorothy, ruby shoes, heel click, I wish I were home, I wish I were home, I wish, good night. Thank you. And the last poem I'm gonna read for now is Biseidu, for whoever had that, who's the requester? Okay. So I'm going to dedicate Biseidu to my mother and to my mentee, Maya Martinez Deers. I've always called Maya Maya. And I was like, Maya, how do you pronounce your last name? That's why I asked you earlier today. Thank you. So this poem is for them and for you. What is your name? Oh, nice to meet you. Okay. Biseidu. While sipping coffee in my mother's Toyota, we hear the bird call of two teenage boys in the parking lot. I, one says, Biseidu, the other returns as they reach for each other. Their cupped handshake pops like the first fat firecrackers of summer. Their fingers shimmy as if they're solving a Rubik's Cube just beyond our sight. Moments later, their schwins head in opposite directions. My mother turns to me, revealing the milky John Waters mustache-thin foam on her upper lip. Waiting dem bin say, Biseidu, na English? She asks, tickled by this tangle of new language. All right, be safe, dude. I pull apart each syllable like string cheese for her. Oh yeah, dem na real paddy, she smiles, surprisingly broken by the tenderness expressed by what half my family might call thugs. Biseidu, 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 we chirp in the car, then nightly into our phones after I leave California. Biseidu, she says, as she softly muffles the rattling of my bones in newfound sobriety. Biseidu, I say years later, her response made raspy by an oxygen treatment at the ER. Biseidu, we whispered to each other across the country, like some word from deep into somewhere too newborn pure for the outdoors, but we saw those two boys do it in broad daylight under a decadent, ruinous sun. Biseidu, Biseidu, we say, Biseidu, and split one more for the road, for all the struggle, tumble, drown. Biseidu, we say, to get on the good foot. We get off of the phone, tight like the bulbous air of two palms that have just kissed. Thank you.
Before anything else, can we please just get one more round of applause for Yalie? That was so lovely. I was just
Thank you.
Yeah, very exciting to hear the new work too.
Thank
So
you.
Thank you for those poems. So I have some questions for you, if you're prepared, if you're ready.
Ready?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I wanted Yalie read at the Care Center in Holyoke yesterday, which was such a wonderful event too. And while you were there, you told kind of your origin story as a poet. And I wondered if you could share that with us tonight, and just how poetry first opened up for you.
Absolutely. So I think like the first kind of iteration of being a poet for me was being an observer, being like the child of immigrants. And so as a first generation American that grew up in arguably one of the kookiest parts of the country in Oakland, there's a lot that I was observing that didn't necessarily correspond with what I was experiencing, like with my family being from Sierra Leone. And so, for example, some of the American customs my parents just really weren't with. And so like an example of that would be like trick-or-treating. They're like, why do you need to beg for candy? We can like give you candy at home, right? So like, what is that about? And they also they didn't quite understand and probably still understand camping too much. But there's things like that I was like, okay, that's like at some point it's painful when you want to like fit in, and then at some point it becomes funny. And so I was kind of trying to piece together kind of differences and likenesses. And so part of that the beginning of poetry for me was observation. And I think the next stage of that was I went to a middle school and elementary school that kind of promoted and was excited about creative writing. But when I got to college, it kind of or high school, it kind of stopped. And it became something that was about rote memorization and being able to analyze and sort of regurgitate what you're told. And so I didn't realize until I was watching a documentary, happened to watch it during spring break, happened to just like turn to a channel with a documentary that talked about the first National Youth Poetry Slam competition, that you could be a young person and still be a participant in poetry. I was kind of told that you could not be a participant in poetry by virtue of there being no spaces in my high school. So I think the other part of it was being able to find outside sort of communities that allowed me to do writing. But had I not seen that documentary, I don't know if I would have known that. And so that was really important and powerful for me to be able to do that and to be in spaces where I could start to write. Also stories that I didn't necessarily see growing up. And I wonder if you guys felt or feel that you were represented in the writing that you saw in high school. Some folks? Okay, so I'm not alone in that. So it's just kind of feeling like there's something that needed to be written that hadn't been written, or to be able to see myself was really important.
Yeah, thank God you just happened to land on that channel that day.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is a thing that happens in high schools all over the country. It's both the pedagogy and the curriculum around poetry can be something really off-putting. It can be something that is very distant from a lot of people. And yeah, I'm glad you found that door open somewhere else.
Yeah.
What is it about poetry for you? What does it offer to you that other genres of writing you think don't offer you or afford you?
I think that, well, part of it is I want to say it feels like it sort of imitates, or mimics, or sort of reflects human conversation, dialogue, and the ways that we can be with each other. I think that like poetry can capture a gesture, can capture a touch, it can capture a particular intimacy that may get lost in other forms or longer forms. So there's something around concision and urgency that I think that poetry can allow, and a sort of softness and tenderness. And I think that because there's so much variation in the form too, I'm drawn to that. And I come from a family of storytellers, just people that tell stories. And actually my first name, I mentioned this in the first poem, is Yalie comes from the term Jeli Muso, which is a griot, a caste of female griots from the west coast of Africa. And so like my parents quite literally named me that. They wanted a medical doctor. They got a poetry doctor instead. So we kind of split the difference there.
I love the idea of a poetry doctor.
Yes.
And also the idea of concision and urgency, being privileged in poetry.
Yeah.
The next question, though, is about sound in your poetry, which is such an important feature, I think, too. And my students were talking about it. So I'm going to just read this question verbatim from one of the students in my class. In the poems we read from Boutelle-Day, one of the through lines we've noticed is your careful attention to language, its sound, and its shape. I wonder if you could speak to the different ways in which this attention manifests itself in your work. In transcribing the phonetic sounds of Boutelle-Day in your mother's speech, for instance, attention to language means care and recognition, and almost seems to take on an incantatory force. So could you just talk about how you're thinking about sound in your poetry as you're writing it? And I don't know, maybe that relates somehow to poetry's oral tradition for you as well.
Well, that question is so gorgeous. I was just kind of like, getting lost in the sounds of that. Thank you so much for that question. I think for me, like maybe things with language come from English not being my first language. And so there's particular words or expressions that exist like outside of English that kind of attune my ear to language. I also think I'm just like really excited about music, and I grew up in a household that had a lot of music from all over the world. And all over the African diaspora. And so I grew up listening to songs that I didn't know what the meanings were, but I trusted the melody, and there's something that moved me in that. And so I think like my ear's been attuned to sound because of that. So language acquisition, what my parents like sort of exposed me to. And I also think that there's a sort of like, they're kind of priming me for fearlessness around the things I didn't understand through music. And so I think that was happening. And I also I really love jazz, and I love hip hop, and I love music that is, and I really love gospel music that is paying attention to cadence and rhythm and stretching words or making words, like chopping words. And so I think that's something that matters to me. And I'm also maybe interested in that because my very beginning with poetry was through spoken word. And so I think that there's something about privileging orality and message that shows up in that. And like when I'm thinking about my poems and when I'm writing them, part of them is that they have to not only read well, but they have to sound good to me too. And so I think that's you kind of can't extricate the two from each other.
Is reading them out loud as you're revising them, is that an important part of your
Absolutely,
your process?
absolutely. Unless I'm in public, then I try to read it in my head. But yeah.
That's great. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. This is a question about place, and we were talking in my class about how your poems are so tied to place and full of so much complex love for home. One of the students was asking, though, I thought this was interesting. I'm curious if your relationship to home changed at all during the writing of the collection. Did you understand Oakland, home, the places that shaped you differently after writing these poems?
Yeah, I love that question. I think I was homesick when I was writing those poems. I'm very proud to be from Oakland, I'm like proud to be from Oakland when I'm in Oakland. But I was at Oakland from a distance where it snows and you need gloves and it's not sunny all the time. And there are particular things about home that I think I was able to see at a distance, and also like through research too. And I think I love home and I love Oakland, but I didn't know how special it was until I started to like do the research. And this is what I'd say also is happening with like, sometimes when people read the collection, they think that I immigrated from Sierra Leone when they're reading the poems. And there's something about Sierra Leone, like the specificity of that place in there too. But it's, I think I'm interested in writing poems that render the complexity of a place, because I grew up thinking that Oakland and being from Sierra Leone were like the worst things ever because of what I saw on television. And so I think like part of my writing and my love is a reclamation for the places. I think also where, like when I say like the object that casts like the largest shadow is the one closest to the light. And so the places that they tell us are the worst or most violent or strange places are the ones that are filled with like endless humanity and really, really interesting stories. And so I think I wanted to capture that too. And I think that's a part of like reclaiming identity comes through like rendering home.
Were most of the poems then written in Ohio? I'm just that doesn't really matter. I'm
Midwest, largely
yeah,
in the Midwest.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the vantage point and the distance actually afforded your ability
Totally.
to write the pieces. Yeah.
Yeah,
How you're describing it.
Absolutely. So Bisedu, like the actual event happened 5 years before I wrote the poem. But it happened in the summer in California. Then I was able to write it 5 summers later in Ohio. So I think also sometimes like the advantage of that too is like the poem needs to kind of gather more moss, and there needs to be more context and things happening for me to understand that moment even more. I knew that it was special, but I think I needed more time to understand.
Yeah. Did you know that it would eventually be a poem, that
Totally.
narrative, though?
Yeah.
But you waited because you wanted it to be right.
Yeah. So just kind of waited, and then I had a writing prompt that I had to do. Deadlines will do it to you, right? Like great things happen during deadlines. Often, not always, but but
nice
yeah.
Qualification.
Yeah. So, but it was just like the right moment. I was like, okay, I think it's time, and so I had a writing prompt that produced the poem.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for that. So this is, in the interview with the Rumpus, you're also talking about approaching the page as a canvas, which I really love too, and how you're talking about how we can create metaphors through spacing and the way the words appear on the page. Could you talk a little bit more about that spacing of language on the page as metaphor? And also, perhaps a second question, but definitely related, perhaps at what stage form begins to manifest itself for you during the revision process or during the writing process?
So I do, like, I think an example of that is the poem about Nina Simone. I tried to use the white space on that page as a metaphor for how she sings the song, and her voice often breaks in these really beautiful ways in the song, and it feels like there's a sort of like control with air and wind when she sings. And I was trying to figure out what would that look like if words were kind of like blown on a page, and so, or were blowing on a page and landing in particular ways. And so I was trying to capture sort of like the movement and the texture of her voice through the page. And another poem, like the metaphor for my two-step, that there's white space and the metaphors are a little on the left and a little on the right and a little on the left, and so they're supposed to imitate a two-step on the page. And so I think for me, I think sometimes like the form, I'm more interested in the content and then the form. I don't think I start with the form and then move into the content. So all my poems look the same. And there was a comment on my thesis where some of the poems showed up that the poems, it wasn't ever explicitly stated that they were boring, but it was communicated that all the poems was just kind of falling the same way, and there was something boring about that, and so that was helpful because it changed how I approached the poems. Even the poem with the haikus with Gabby Douglas, like bend not but do not break, your Black life or your backflip a metaphor for this whole Black life, right? And it's supposed to show her the way that the haiku is broken up is supposed to be a backflip, and it's supposed to be to capture. I'm endeavoring to capture like a gymnast movement. So yeah, no, it was boring. I agree. That was a fine a fine critique. But yeah, there is just an invitation to do more with it. But for me, I think sometimes what can happen is that there can be an excitement in the form that precludes like. Kind of like the highest quality that a poem can get to. And so I want to start with my message and content first and then see how it lands on the page second.
No, and I loved in a poem like Space, how you're using space there too, because you see it on the page, and there's a real alienation of the self that's created through your use of white space and where you're breaking the line there. That's really beautiful and moving, and obviously adds.
That was very hard for writing competitions because you can't have your name in the.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't remember what I did, but I think I had to take the whole name out, and I was like, I hope this works, but.
And also, students in my class, we talked about the cathartic ending of that poem when suddenly the I is. Realized for the speaker there. But did you all realize that, and we didn't talk about it? Maybe you all realized and just thought I knew, but I didn't, that there's no letter I anywhere else in the poem? Okay, people are nodding. There's like, yeah, he should have known. I didn't know. I wasn't tracking that. So good on you. And then I just was, okay. I was blown away by that, and really excited about how you took the constraint to another level as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. I really love how you use list making in your work. And I'm thinking about your poem that we talked about it in class, that memorializes Nia Wilson, where you have 100 different blessings for Nia Wilson. And I'm wondering if you could talk about the invention of that form and how you see the intentions behind its act of list making. There's something in there too. I don't know if this is related to what you would want to talk about, but there's something for me quite different about the blessing of the list making than maybe a traditional elegy. But I mean, similar intentions, but they seem to be moving different directions somehow. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think like with that form, I think what maybe we've all maybe seen over the last decade, the way that Black folks that have been murdered are sort of spoken about in media is there are more details around the death and the undoing of the body than there are about who the person was before they died, and the dreams that they had, and the beauty that they carried, and the people that loved them, and their quirks and their imperfections, and just like the majesty of who they were. And so I was trying to capture that. Every little bit of Nia Wilson. I wrote this poem. Talk about being at a distance. I was in Vermont when I wrote this poem at a residency. And I just obsessively researched about who she was in her life. And that took a lot of work because there's more details about her death. So I had to kind of go everywhere on the internet to find these things. And I just really wanted to dignify her, even at the most cellular level or the smallest part of her, like every single cell in her body I wanted to dignify with the blessing. And so the point of the Nia is to reclaim Black life, like even in death. And so it's 100 blessings, is thinking about having it be a Nia and having it be 100 blessings. And so that's how I did that. And also thinking about like when you repeat a word multiple times, the first time doesn't mean the same thing as the last time. So the first bless is not the same as the last blessing. That's the 100th blessing is a blessing with 99 blessings on top of it. And so it's thinking about like what is trying to be banished in that time, and what's trying to be cleaned out, and what's trying to be brought in. I'm trying to bring light to her legacy.
That's really beautiful, and there's such a really powerful incantatory force
Yeah.
to that piece. Yeah.
Thank you.
This is definitely a related question from another student in the class. How does your own process for working through grief and joy influence your poetry? And how does poetry help you contend with grief and manifest joy?
Can you read that again?
Yeah. How does your own process for working through grief and joy influence your poems? And how does poetry, if it does, help you contend with grief and manifest joy?
It's a really interesting question because for multiple reasons, I partially don't know how to answer that, but I do know that I wrote the book that I needed before I went through grief. So I wrote this book, and my little sister passed away about 6 months before the book came out. And so the book is really depends and leans on hope and thinks about a future and pushes through difficulty in a way that it's harder to write this way in grief, but I was able to write this way before. So I think it's looking at, and I hope to write again in a way that is like pushing through that. But I think for me, it's like looking at those old poems. And I think it's also thinking about poems where there's a confrontation of that, or that there is like a processing of the real time of grief, and also whatever spaces really articulate the fact that grief is not a linear process. And so those are the things I seek, and I also prayer is helpful for me too. So I seek it in that. And what was the thing about joy?
Yeah, I mean, does poetry help you manifest joy?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think poetry manifesting joy is also in conversation, or it's observing things, or it's going to the museum, things that we think about, like been thinking about what is the definition of poetry, but like maybe it's a transformation. So I'm looking for spaces where I can cite transformation and feel transformed. And so those are the places. And I do think that poetry can absolutely manifest joy. And I think that's often done collectively. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see what you just said there related to what I was talking about with Ross Gay earlier, that the idea that there's no, joy is no simple or easy thing. And it sounds like how you're talking about the process of writing the poems is evident of that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll just ask 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I really want to know about your relationship to haiku, and what haiku affords you that maybe other forms don't, what you're drawn to there. And also, forget the haiku haters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously have.
They're a tough bunch. No, I haven't forgotten them.
Yeah?
Yeah. But I think for me, I just think that there's so many incredible poetry forms, and I'm just so moved by how can you capture so much in something like 17 syllables. I know that it can vary depending on your approach to haikus, but just thinking about that, for me, it's originally a stress buster. I used to write haikus when I was pissed. And it's very helpful to just get it out and be done with it. Or something strange happens and you write haikus and okay, that's exactly what that big thing was right here. And so it's thinking about how can you sort of change the size or the mood of a moment that you've experienced. And so that's what it means to me. And so to even see what I saw on that train in Paris, I'm like, that was so huge. How can I could write forever about this, or I could just write this haiku. And I feel like for me, haikus almost feel like Polaroids. Yeah, they're just a quick snapshot and you have it. And it's a note, and I could talk forever about what that means, but I was able to find the best shorthand for something that was really moving to me.
And were you just talking a second ago, is the haiku sometimes as a vessel for rage? Something really
Totally.
angers you?
Yeah. I'm a lot more chill now, but I used to have a really long commute, and there's things that bothered me.
Yeah.
To work and from work and at work. Yeah.
But is it the compression and somehow heightened the urgency in haiku form?
Yeah, and the thing too is for me, it was a vessel for humor. So I just would write things that were kind of funny to me that, well, they weren't funny at the time, but I would sort of repurpose that into something funny. So, yeah.
I love thinking about the form that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last question is related to our 4 fabulous poets who read for us tonight. I mean, this is such a horrific time, and I don't know if you want to connect your answer to this moment as well.
Okay.
But I just wondered if you had advice for young aspiring writers.
Yes, this was advice that was given to me 23 years ago. And the advice is, if anyone tells you to write differently or not like who you are, run the other way. And that was very helpful. It was given to me by Dave Eggers. And it's very helpful because there are ways that there are people that may not understand what you're trying to say, and because they don't understand your brilliance, they will tell you to change it so they can understand it. So stick to your language, your brilliance, your wisdom, what you're reading, consuming, and write with your own voice, because nobody else can write your story better than you. And I mean, be open, obviously, to feedback, but really understand your voice and who you are, and it's something that we need in a space that can start to feel homogenized or resist distinct voices and experiences and backgrounds. So I'd say really find your people that can read your work and be in spaces of community, and don't let anyone turn you around or pull you away from your voice and your magic.
Awesome. That is a great note to end on. So
thank you.
One more round of applause, or please just continue for our high school poets and for Yalie, Kamara. Thank you again for that beautiful reading.
My pleasure.
Yalie will be right down here momentarily signing books and just wanting to say hello to you.